If there's one thing no one can deny, it's that the world is in chaos. Crises, uncertainties, injustices. It seems like each day humanity drifts further from what truly matters. But what if I told you there's a timeless manual full of divine wisdom that can teach us to live with faith, resilience, and purpose, even in the face of the greatest difficulties? The book of James is exactly that. A practical guide for those who want to learn to trust in God, act justly, and face challenges with wisdom. Now, a warning. This isn't a text for those looking for easy shortcuts or superficial answers. James doesn't sugarcoat it. He speaks directly, without beating around the bush, and confronts us to live a true faith that translates into deeds, patience, and spiritual transformation. If you've ever felt that your faith was tested, if you've ever wondered why some prayers seem unanswered, or if you struggle to maintain hope in the midst of trials, then this study is for you. Throughout this content, we'll explore how James teaches us to maintain unshakable faith, control the tongue, seek wisdom from above, and live with humility. We'll talk about the danger of riches, the difference between divine and earthly wisdom, and the importance of prayer. And more, you'll discover why friendship with God requires choices and why rescuing those who have gone astray is a mission for all of us. The best part? This isn't just theory. Every teaching from James can be applied to your life today. This is an invitation to a journey of growth, maturity, and transformation. If you're ready to dive into this eternal wisdom, keep reading, because what comes next could change the way you view faith and life. Life is a constant test. Faith is not measured on the good days, when everything is going well and the winds are in our favor, but in times of adversity, when trials seem to crush the soul. James teaches that trusting in God in difficult times is more than an act of belief. It's a conscious choice of perseverance. Imagine a boat in the middle of a storm. Those who have faith hold firmly to the helm, knowing the storm will pass and a safe harbor lies ahead. But those who let doubt take over may end up sinking in hopelessness. The world preaches the logic of self-preservation, where pain and challenges are seen as signs of defeat. However, James presents a revolutionary concept. Consider difficulties as a reason for joy, because they shape our Christian character. This might sound absurd at first, but think of gold being refined in fire. It needs to go through intense heat to become purer. Similarly, faith is strengthened when tested. Each problem, each challenge, each fall is a step towards spiritual maturity. But how do you maintain faith when everything around you seems to be falling apart? Prayer. Simple yet powerful. James emphasizes that sincere prayer not only strengthens the soul, but connects us directly to the source of divine wisdom. If despair knocks at your door, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and talk to God. It's not about reciting empty words, but opening your heart, trusting in the bigger plan, and moving forward. Just as an athlete trains to strengthen their muscles, a Christian strengthens their faith through the daily practice of prayer and communion with God. Patience is also a fundamental pillar. Faith doesn't bring instant results like a vending machine. It's a process, a walk. Those who plant a seed today don't harvest tomorrow. It's necessary to trust in God's timing, in divine justice, and in the promise that all things work together for the good of those who love Him. The story of Job is a classic example of this. He lost everything, suffered, but remained steadfast. In the end, God restored his life abundantly. And here comes an important detail. Faith is not just an internal feeling, but something that manifests in actions. Standing firm isn't about folding your arms and waiting, but continuing to walk, even if stumbling along the way. Those who trust in God work, fight, seek to grow, help others, and face challenges with courage. Life will always have challenges, but it's up to each person to decide whether to be dominated by fear or to move forward in the confidence that God is in control. True humility isn't about belittling oneself, but recognizing the greatness of God. James, despite being Jesus' brother, could have presented himself with a prestigious title. However, he chooses to be called simply a servant of God. This is not a mere detail, but a profound lesson. The world values status, power, and recognition, but in the kingdom of God, true greatness lies in serving. And let's be honest, how many times are we tempted to seek human approval rather than simply live to please God? We live in a time where the image we project seems more important than who we really are. Social media reinforces this search for external validation, making many forget what truly matters. James teaches us that humility is the foundation of genuine faith. He reminds us that before God, there are no positions or titles that make us superior to others. True Christian character is built in submission to God and in serving others. Humility doesn't mean being passive or weak. On the contrary, it is a strength that shapes our attitudes. Think of a truly inspiring leader. He doesn't impose his authority by force, but by example. Jesus, the greatest of all, washed his disciples' feet to teach that serving is an act of greatness. When James presents himself as a servant, he invites us to rethink our stance in life. Are we living for our own glory or to fulfill a greater purpose? And practically, how can we develop this humility? Small gestures make the difference. Listening more than speaking, recognizing our mistakes, valuing others' work, not thinking ourselves superior due to position or knowledge. If we want to grow spiritually, we need to abandon hypocrisy and adopt a teachable heart. James shows us that humility brings us closer to God, while pride drives us away from Him. Humility also protects us from partiality and hasty judgment. How many times do we look at someone and make conclusions without even knowing their story? James later in his letter condemns this type of behavior. Instead of elevating ourselves at the expense of others, we should practice generosity and justice, treating everyone equally. After all, in the end, our true wealth lies in our relationship with God, not in titles or material possessions. Talking about faith is easy. The difficult part is living it out practically. James leaves no room for doubt. Faith that doesn't translate into actions is useless. Imagine someone saying they trust in God but doesn't lift a finger to help the next person, forgive, or act justly. That's not faith, it's just empty words. Having faith is more than believing. It's demonstrating that belief in every choice, in every action. After all, if someone says they have faith but lives selfishly and indifferently, what's the point? James gives us a practical and direct example. If someone sees a brother in need and just says, "God bless you," without doing anything to help, what kind of faith is that? This makes us reflect on how we live. Do we have an active faith that drives our actions, or do we just repeat beautiful words without real impact? Genuine faith leads us to act, to extend a hand, to practice justice, to show generosity, and to live according to the teachings of Jesus. The big issue here is not that works save someone. Salvation is a gift of divine grace, but that gift generates spiritual transformation. When someone truly experiences the presence of God, their life changes. They begin to live differently because their faith is a reflection of their new identity. James wants to remind us that faith without action is like a body without spirit, something lifeless. What does this mean in practice? If you believe in God, that belief should influence how you treat others, your patience, your faithfulness, your character, and your stance toward life. Look at Abraham's story. He didn't just say he trusted God. He demonstrated his faith through his obedience. When God called him to sacrifice Isaac, he trusted, even without fully understanding the plan. Rahab, the prostitute of Jericho, also proved her faith by helping the Israelite spies, risking her life to do what was right. These examples show that authentic faith always leads to a corresponding attitude. If someone wants to know if they have true faith, they only need to examine their actions. How do you treat those around you? Does your life reflect the values of the kingdom of God, or is your faith just an abstract concept? The issue is clear. Faith without works is dead. Those who truly trust in God demonstrate it daily in how they act, in their testimony, and in the way they fulfill their mission in the world. And this true faith leads us to the next lesson from James. Trials shape character. No one likes to go through difficulties, but it is in them that true Christian character is forged. James teaches us that trials are not mere punishments or bad luck, but divine opportunities for growth. Think of life as a spiritual gym. Without resistance, the muscles of faith don't develop. If everything were easy, no one would learn perseverance. It is precisely in difficult moments that we are shaped, refined, and prepared for something greater. The metaphor of gold being purified in the fire is perfect for illustrating this process. The intense heat removes impurities and makes the metal more valuable. Similarly, God allows us to go through the fire of trials to make us stronger and spiritually mature. Job is a great example of this. He lost everything, faced extreme suffering, but didn't give up his faith. In the end, God restored his life abundantly, showing that suffering is not the end, but a stage in the learning process. Now, how do we face difficulties without crumbling? Patience is essential. James invites us to see tribulations as a test that teaches us to trust more in God and less in our own strength. How many times, in the middle of a problem, is our tendency to question and despair? But what if instead we started asking, what does God want to teach me through this? This shift in mindset makes all the difference. Another crucial point is not allowing trials to make us bitter or hopeless. Many, in the face of pain, become resentful and drift away from faith. But James teaches that we should see these situations as opportunities for growth, not as punishments. If an athlete gave up after the first tough training session, they would never make it to the podium. Similarly, if we give up in the face of difficulties, we'll miss what God is preparing for us. And here's a powerful secret. Those who persevere achieve something much greater than they imagined. James reminds us that life is a journey of growth, where every obstacle we overcome brings us closer to God. And when we understand this, we can face difficulties with more confidence, knowing they are part of our process. But for this, it's essential to learn to control what we say, as our words can either build up or destroy. Words have weight. What comes out of our mouth can heal or hurt, build or destroy, bring us closer or push us away. James warns us about the immense power of the tongue and the responsibility we have in using it. He compares the tongue to a small rudder that steers a large ship, or a spark that can set an entire forest on fire. This means that a single word said at the wrong moment can cause irreparable damage. How many friendships, marriages, families, and even careers have been destroyed by thoughtless words? Often, people underestimate the impact of what they say. The poison of gossip, slander, and judgment can contaminate hearts and ruin reputations. James teaches us that a mouth that praises God cannot be the same one that hurts others. You can't be a source of blessing and cursing at the same time. But practically speaking, how do we control what we say? The first rule is simple. If what you're going to say doesn't build up, it might be better to remain silent. Self-control of the tongue doesn't just mean avoiding negative words, but also using it for good. Imagine how much a sincere compliment can brighten someone's day, how much advice can help a person in crisis, or how a prayer can strengthen a hurting heart. If words can hurt, they can also heal. Small gestures like "thank you," "I'm sorry," or "I believe in you" make all the difference. James teaches us that true divine wisdom is reflected in the way we speak. The problem is that the tongue is directly linked to the heart. Jesus taught that the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. If our words are constantly bitter, negative, or destructive, it's a sign that something needs to change internally. This leads us to the need for spiritual transformation. It's not enough to just try to speak better. We must feed the soul with good things like prayer, communion with God, and the practice of justice and humility. Mastering the tongue is a constant challenge, but those who learn to control it demonstrate spiritual maturity and wisdom. James makes it clear that those who teach the word of God must be even more careful with what they say, for their words impact lives. If we want to live a true faith, we need to have coherence between what we say and what we do. And speaking of wisdom, James also teaches us about the difference between earthly wisdom and divine wisdom. Not all wisdom comes from God. James makes a clear distinction between earthly wisdom, which is based on selfish ambition and the pursuit of status, and divine wisdom, which is pure, peaceful, and full of mercy. The world teaches that the smartest person is the one who knows how to manipulate situations to their advantage, accumulating wealth and power without caring about the means. But is this really intelligence? In human eyes, yes. In God's eyes, it's a trap that leads to destruction. Earthly wisdom is often tied to envy and pride. It's the kind of mentality that makes someone wish for another's failure, desire to win at any cost, and measure success by money or influence. James teaches us that this type of wisdom does not come from above, but is earthly, animalistic, and even demonic. Just look at the world around us. Wars, injustices, betrayals, corruption, all stem from this selfish pursuit of power. And in the end, no one wins, because true wealth lies in inner peace. Divine wisdom, on the other hand, follows a completely different path. It does not seek self-promotion, but rather the common good. Those who possess divine wisdom act with humility, respect others, cultivate patience, and choose their words carefully. This wisdom manifests in actions, not just in beautiful speeches. A truly wise person doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Their life is a reflection of divine grace. But how can we seek this wisdom? James gives us a clear hint: ask God. It's that simple. He says that anyone lacking wisdom should ask the Lord, who gives it generously without reproach. This means that it doesn't matter what your past is, the mistakes you've made, or how much knowledge you have. God gives wisdom to those who seek it sincerely. Reading the Bible, meditating on its teachings, and practicing justice are ways to cultivate this wisdom daily. The difference between earthly wisdom and divine wisdom becomes evident in the fruits each one produces. While the first brings chaos, division, and suffering, the second brings peace, justice, and communion. James challenges us to choose which one we will follow. And when speaking about choices, he also warns us about one of the greatest dangers in Christian life: the attachment to material wealth. Money is a great servant, but a terrible master. James warns that the relentless pursuit of wealth can divert the Christian from the true purpose of life. The problem is not with money itself, but with the heart of the one who possesses it. Many place their trust in possessions, believing that security and happiness come from what is in the bank. However, the Bible makes it clear: true wealth is not found in material goods, but in communion with God. James reminds us that riches are temporary. He compares them to the grass of the field, which grows, flourishes, and soon withers. How many people have lost everything in an instant? Financial crises, natural disasters, unexpected setbacks. Nothing material is guaranteed. Even so, many live as if money were their only sustenance. But what if, instead of accumulating only for themselves, people use their possessions to help those in need? The problem with wealth is not just the attachment, but how it is acquired and used. James condemns social injustice, denouncing those who enrich by exploiting others. He says that the wages withheld from workers cry out to God, showing that he does not ignore injustice. A Christian should be upright, generous, and just in everything they possess. If God gives us resources, it is so that we can use them wisely and bless others. James also gives a warning about unchecked luxury. Living solely for pleasure and self-satisfaction can lead to a distancing from God. This doesn't mean a Christian can't have comfort, but that they must keep their heart detached. Those who have much should ask themselves, am I using what I have to do good? Generosity is a way of demonstrating faith and obedience. The true purpose of wealth is to serve the kingdom and others. In the end, James challenges us to reflect on where we place our trust. If it's in money, we're building our life on sand. But if we trust in God, we find true stability. Riches can fail, but God's faithfulness is eternal. And speaking of trust, James teaches us that there is something even more valuable than any treasure: friendship with God, something that can never be bought, but only earned through faith. You can't sit on the fence. James is direct in stating that anyone who wants to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. But what does this mean in practice? It's not about avoiding people or isolating oneself from society, but about not being swayed by values that contradict God's will. The world teaches that success, fame, and pleasure above all else are important. But God teaches that true life is found in humility, justice, and love for others. These are opposing paths, and sooner or later we must choose which one to follow. The problem with friendship with the world lies in the divided heart. Many want to serve God, but without giving up the temptations and comfort that the world offers. They want to be Christians, but without sacrificing anything. James shows us that this kind of faith does not endure. True friendship with God requires commitment. Imagine a marriage where one party is unfaithful. It doesn't work, right? The same happens with our relationship with God. He wants us whole, not half-hearted. But then, how do we cultivate this friendship with God? The answer lies in daily communion, prayer, reading the Word, seeking divine wisdom and discernment. It's like any friendship. To be strengthened, it requires time and dedication. The more time you spend with God, the more you learn to recognize His voice and desire what He desires. This doesn't mean life will be perfect, but that you will have a solid foundation to face any challenge. Another sign of friendship with God is the desire to live according to His principles, even if this goes against what the world says. Those who walk with God do not worry about following passing trends, but live with purpose and faithfulness. This may mean letting go of certain practices, toxic relationships, or even opportunities that compromise your integrity. But the reward is always worth it: a life of peace, hope, and clear direction. James invites us to reflect: are we living to please God or simply to fit into the world's system? If we seek human recognition above the divine calling, something is wrong. True friendship with God requires renunciation, but it brings an invaluable gain: His constant presence. And when we have this presence, we understand that life is fleeting and that we must live it with purpose, for every moment counts. Life passes in the blink of an eye. James reminds us of this when he says that we are like a vapor that appears for a moment and then vanishes. The problem is that many live as though they will last forever. They make grand plans, accumulate wealth, build empires, but forget the essential. None of that has value without God. Just one unforeseen event, an unexpected twist, and everything can change. So what is the true purpose of our existence? The great mistake of humankind is planning the future without considering divine sovereignty. James criticizes those who say, "Tomorrow we will do this or that," as if they had absolute control over their lives. But what if tomorrow doesn't come? It's not wrong to have dreams or set goals, but we must remember that everything depends on God's will. The true wise person says, "If the Lord wills, we will do this or that." This mindset is not fatalism, but recognition that God is in control. If life is fleeting, we should make the most of it in the right way. But here's the point: making the most of it doesn't mean living without limits or seeking only momentary pleasures. It means living with purpose, valuing what truly matters. How many people spend their days worried about irrelevant things while ignoring the call to serve, love, and transform lives? James reminds us that the only thing that remains is what we do for God and for others. And what about procrastination? Many know what's right, but delay important decisions. James warns, anyone who knows the good they should do and does not do it commits sin. This means that it's not enough to just avoid evil. We must act in favor of good. Life is too short to stay still, waiting for the perfect moment to start. Want to improve your relationship with God? Start today. Want to help someone? Do it now. Tomorrow may not come. That's why James invites us to live with spiritual urgency. Instead of wasting time on fleeting things, we should invest in what has eternal value: our faith, our communion with God, our testimony. Because in the end, everything we possess here stays behind. And when we understand this, we realize that the greatest wealth is not in what we accumulate, but in how we live each day. And speaking of living well, James also warns us about those who misuse their possessions and exploit others. Prayer is one of the most powerful weapons a Christian can have, but unfortunately many underestimate it. James teaches us that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. In other words, it's not just a simple repetition of words, but a real and deep connection with God. When we understand that prayer can change not only circumstances, but also our hearts, we begin to give it the importance it deserves. Those who pray with faith not only speak to God, but also learn to hear His voice. James guides us to pray in every situation, in affliction, in joy, in sickness. The mistake of many is to seek God only when things go wrong. But prayer is not just a cry for help, it is a lifestyle. Imagine a relationship where there is only contact in times of crisis. It would be superficial, right? The same logic applies to God. The more time we spend in prayer, the more our faith is strengthened, and the more our trust in Him grows. Prayer also plays a powerful role in healing, both physically and spiritually. James talks about calling the elders of the church to anoint and pray for the sick, showing that collective faith has power. This doesn't mean prayer replaces medical treatments, but that God's power can act beyond what medicine explains. Moreover, confession of sins and mutual intercession are forms of spiritual healing, restoring hearts and strengthening fellowship among brothers. The example of Elijah, mentioned by James, proves that prayer can even change the course of nature. He prayed for it not to rain, and for 3.5 years the heavens were shut. Then he prayed again, and the rain returned. This shows that prayer, when made with faith, has the power to transform impossible situations. But be careful, this is not about trying to manipulate God, but about aligning our desires with His will. Those who learn to pray with maturity seek God's glory more than their own will. James teaches us that prayer is an essential tool to strengthen faith, bring hope, and keep us firm in difficult times. Praying is not wasting time, but investing in what truly matters. If we want to see changes in our lives, we need to bend our knees and seek God with sincerity. And when we learn to live this way, we understand that faith is not only about what we feel or believe, but about how we impact the world around us. And this leads us to James' last great teaching, the importance of rescuing those who have strayed from the path of truth. James ends his letter with a powerful call, the responsibility to bring back those who have drifted from the faith. He says that whoever turns a sinner from their error saves a soul from death and covers a multitude of sins. In other words, the Christian life is not just about taking care of oneself, but also about reaching out to those who have lost their way. How many people have been firm in the faith, but were suffocated by the worries of life, fell into temptations, or simply became disillusioned? Many view the strayed with judgment, but James teaches us to view them with compassion. Instead of pointing fingers, he invites us to act as true brothers. After all, who has never made a mistake? Who has never had a moment of weakness? Rescuing someone doesn't mean just talking about God, but demonstrating the love of Christ through actions. It could be through an invitation to talk, an intercessory prayer, or simply being present in that person's life. But how do you approach someone who has strayed? The secret lies in the balance between truth and love. James doesn't say to ignore the error, but he also doesn't encourage severe condemnation. Approaching with humility and showing a genuine interest in the person is essential. Often someone who has strayed already knows they are on the wrong path. They don't need more accusations, but someone who reminds them of God's grace and the purpose they have in Him. Another important point is that rescuing someone is not an exclusive mission of pastors or religious leaders. James makes it clear that this is a responsibility of all Christians. Those who truly love do not watch someone destroy themselves without doing anything. And more, this act of love not only saves the rescued person, but also strengthens the faith of the one who rescues. After all, nothing brings us closer to God than being part of the restoration of a life. In the end, James teaches us that faith is not a solitary walk. We are one body, one family. If one member weakens, the others must help. This call to rescue reminds us that our mission goes beyond living our own faith. We must be instruments of God in the lives of others. And throughout his letter, James gives us valuable tools for this. Persevering faith, works that reflect love, divine wisdom, control of the tongue, humility, and constant prayer. Now that you've seen the depth and wisdom contained in the book of James, the big question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Because the truth is simple, knowing doesn't change anything if it's not put into practice. James already warned us, faith without works is dead. So after all you've learned, how will your faith manifest in your daily life? Will you choose to trust God more in times of trials? Will you seek to control your words? Or will you live an active faith that transforms your life and the lives of those around you? Maybe throughout this study, you've noticed areas in your life that need adjustment. That's great. The first step to growth is recognizing where we are and where we need to go. Have you been clinging too much to wealth and forgetting the true source of security? Or perhaps you've fallen into the trap of earthly wisdom based on ambition and pride, instead of seeking divine wisdom. This is the time to reflect and make decisions that will shape your spiritual future. And most importantly, you are not alone in this journey. God is by your side, ready to strengthen your faith, renew your hope, and guide you to a life of purpose. But remember, it all starts with one step. So what will be your first action? Will you dedicate more time to prayer? Will you help someone who has strayed from the faith? Will you start applying the word in your daily life? What matters is not perfection, but the commitment to grow a little more each day. If this message touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we always talk about faith, spiritual growth, and how to apply God's teachings in real life. Don't miss the chance to keep learning and growing stronger. And if this content made sense to you, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. After all, God's word was not meant to be kept, but to be lived and spread. Now, the choice is in your hands. Will you be just a listener, or will you become a doer of the word?